I've clicked onto the Global Tropical RE for August the 16th, 2023. As is always the case in these videos, the thoughts expressed here are mine alone and will make decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones, look towards your local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So across the tropics today, we have four systems that we're going to talk about. Primarily, we're going to be talking about two out of the four, but brief mention on Tropical Storm Fernanda here as it weakens across the Eastern Pacific. This system is going to continue tracking westwards and may approach the Hawaiian Islands as a remnant low over the coming days, though the system is forecast to weaken quite substantially and may actually be near dissipation overall by the time it gets there. But if it does remain a remnant system by then, it could still bring some impacts to the Hawaiian Islands, but nothing significant is expected. We also have Tropical Storm Greg here southeast of the Hawaiian Islands. This system will continue moving westwards, and impacts to the Hawaiian Islands is not expected from Greg as it continues through the Central Pacific. The main system today that we're going to be talking about is Tropical Storm Hilary here off the coastline of Mexico. And this system is looking primed to intensify fairly significantly as it tracks northwestwards. Right now, the system is developing fairly well overall. The system looks to be a little bit tilted with height. Oh, you can see the surface center appears to be at least going off the low-level flow. It looks to be maybe about here, and you can see some of the enhanced curling in the cloud features here on the southwestern side of this surface center. This might indicate where the mid-level center is, so we have a little bit of a tilt with height from the low-level center to the mid-level center. Generally, for an intensifying tropical cyclone, you want these to be both stacked, and Hilary is still pretty close to having that stacked, but it is a little bit tilted. Though, given the environment that Hilary is in, that is forecast to be very low shear and highly divergent, it will likely be able to fix that in fairly short order, especially with this deep convection. Firing around it, with this convection around the mid-level center firing as well, it might be able to tug this low-level center underneath this, and we might see a coupling take place there. And by then, I wouldn't be surprised to see an inner core start forming, and then we can start seeing the system get towards hurricane intensity. But overall, this system is forecast to stay offshore of Mexico. You can see where it is right now relative to the coastline. There may still be some thunderstorm impacts here. You can see some far outer bands from the storm just offshore, and there also might be some high surf concerns. But the main concern for impacts will be for Baja California and Southern California as we get towards the latter half of the forecast. Now, this is just showing conditions of how favorable the environment will be for Hilary's strengthening. This is a 200 millibar flow from the GFS, and you can just see the high divergence aloft. Very strong winds. I know the blue may not look very strong, but that's 30 to 40 knot winds there, diverging away from Hilary. That's a very favorable environment. I've talked about it several times how it's favorable to have all this divergence aloft, and it also makes for a low shear environment. This, coupled with very warm sea-surface temperatures, will likely allow for significant rapid intensification. This is shown well in the ship's rapid intensification probabilities. I'm just pointing out this map here primarily. Ignore all this other stuff here. And you can see very significant odds here of rapid intensification, and also much higher than climatology in a lot of these cases here. So this is very likely to rapidly intensify at some point in its forecast. You can see ship's forecast having this becoming a major hurricane category 4 on its forecast. Now, the National Hurricane Center has this going at a category 3 at peak, and that seems fair to me right now. This system is monsoonal in nature, so we do need to keep that in mind, that maybe that could have an impact on its overall peak intensity. But regardless of that, this system is forecast to intensify significantly either way. Now, in terms of track, you can see on this track forecast from ships what I was talking about with the latter half of this forecast, the system actually getting pretty close now to Baja California and California. And if we look at the 500 millibar flow from the GFS, there are a few features that we can pick out here. Obviously, there's Hurricane Hilary on the model, and here is a trough off the coastline of California. This is actually active right now. You can see it on hour 0 of it, and this trough is forecast to strengthen over the coming days. And rather than having this ridge here northeast of Hawaii extend, say, to the western coast of the U.S. and carry the storm out west like other storms we've seen this season, this trough will keep that ridge from doing so. And this trough now, with its flow generally like this, will try to pull this storm northwards. Now, there is a bit of uncertainty on exactly how far east or west this storm gets. The GFS is on a solution similar to ships to where it actually makes landfall in Baja, California, and then comes into Southern California, and that would be bringing significant impacts of tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall. Now, the European, now actually, I'll show you the GFS track on that. But the European shows it generally the similar 500 millibar pattern, but it is a bit further west. In fact, keeps the storm offshore of Baja, California, takes a track. What reminds me more of Hurricane K of last year, although K was also a little bit closer to the coastline, so maybe a bit further west than that. But even in this case, there is still tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall brought to Baja, California and Southern California. Now, this is one potential impact of its track. Here's that trough that I told you about, but also at the 200 millibar level, there's this ridge here, this upper ridge to the east of the storm. And from what I can tell on the GFS and European, there's a little bit of a subtle difference between the positioning of this ridge. This storm is still pretty strong by the time it gets to this to the coastline of Baja, California on the models. So it feels some of the southwesterly flow from this ridge a bit more on the GFS. And so what I think might be happening is this ridge is pushing the storm closer to Baja, California overall. And that gets the system to come ashore on the GFS model. While on the European, the system is a bit weaker, but also this ridge is more having a southerly push on Hilary overall. So it keeps the system more offshore overall. Now, of course, there is this trough, which naturally will have a bit of a push towards the northeast, but I can see that maybe this would be some impact on the differences between track between the GFS and the European models. Now, the National Hurricane Center is taking sort of a middle ground between these two models, which seems like a good idea to me. And you can see their forecast cone here forecasting a major hurricane here by this weekend and then weakening as it comes towards the coastline. And this could be something that's not too familiar for those in Southern California. We could actually see the system come turning post-tropical, but still bringing tropical storm force winds to Southern California. And this could absolutely result in some tropical storm watches or warnings in Southern California, which if you didn't know, before this season, they were not able to do that in Southern California, the National Weather Service offices. This year, they were made able to, so we may see some impacts or some watches and warnings, rather, issued there along the coastline. But regardless of that, we are expecting strong winds and heavy rainfall to spread across the entire region from, say, generally north of Cabo San Lucas all the way into California, maybe even up towards central California, as this system is forecast to sort of parallel the coastline. If it stays offshore, it'll parallel it, but if it moves ashore, then we'll likely just continue moving up the spine of California, but it could continue moving up north as the trough weakens eventually further into the forecast. But for those in Baja California and California, stay tuned to your local weather offices and local emergency management, as they're going to have the best information on what you can do ahead of the storm, and make sure your hurricane preparedness kit is ready ahead of the storm. Your time is running out, as this weekend here, it's Wednesday, so you really need to get your things ready for Hurricane Hilary. All right, now we're going to move to the Atlantic, as we have a few systems to monitor over the coming week. We have two tropical waves here in the tropical Atlantic, which have decent odds of forming out to sea. And now this system that's most east could bring some impacts to the Baja California, the Cabo Verde Islands. I got my geography mixed up there a little bit, but after that, it's forecast to head out to sea and likely to remain weak. But this system here in the central tropical Atlantic, we have some model splits on exactly how the system will develop. Some models develop this into a hurricane, some models don't. We'll have to see exactly how that plays out, but these systems are generally forecast to stay out to sea for the next 7 days. The main concern is this area of interest in the Gulf of Mexico. And this will be as a tropical wave moves into the Gulf of Mexico. The environmental conditions will likely support some gradual development as the system comes westwards, and we could see a tropical cyclone form there next week. Now, here's a GFS 850 millibar flow. This is Sunday afternoon, and you can see the wave here now in the Gulf of Mexico west of Florida. And if we look at the 200 millibar flow at this time, you can see we do have generally anticyclonic flow aloft, a fairly favorable environment. And given the warm seasonal temperatures, it's absolutely possible that the system does gradually develop into a tropical cyclone. Seasonal temperatures are very warm here, about 31 to 32 degrees Celsius, I believe I've seen from some maps. And you can see that play out on the GFS. We have now on Monday afternoon, the system is still a tropical wave, but it is showing maybe some signs of development. And then by the time we get to Tuesday afternoon, we have an area of low pressure formed off the coastline. Now the GFS has been going a little bit back and forth here on exactly how the system develops. A couple runs ago, it had a fully formed tropical storm coming into southern Texas. Now the European does have a tropical storm or tropical depression forming, and it actually has it coming up on the coastline up further north here. And now the general track westwards here is fairly high confidence, as we do have the forecast of a ridge building over the United States, and this will likely drive the system into Texas or around that region, potentially as far south as Mexico. But the system is not forecast to be a big hurricane. This system will have a couple days over the Gulf of Mexico, and especially as we get into peak season here, with the warm season temperatures, you just got to watch these systems as they come in. We've seen this happen several times in the past. Imelda 2019 was a similar case where we had a system just sitting in the Gulf for a couple days, and it formed into a tropical cyclone before it came into the coastline. And that actually turned out to be a very heavy rainfall event for Texas. Not saying, of course, that will be an Imelda, but just something to keep in mind as these systems come through the Gulf of Mexico. And you can also see our central tropical Atlantic system there moving through the tropical Atlantic. And those systems are forecast to stay out to sea. But we are getting into peak season now in the Atlantic, and we are seeing increased signs that we are going to be seeing some increased activity over the coming weeks and in late August and into September. And for those not only in the Atlantic, but also in the East Pacific along Mexico and Baja, California, you really need to have your hurricane preparedness kit ready if you have not already. There is still time. Remember, the peak of hurricane season is not for about another month. The climatological peak is September 10th. So we do have some time still to prepare. Of course, it's not guaranteed that a hurricane hits your location, but you always got to be prepared just in case that scenario does occur. You never want to be caught off guard with a hurricane coming towards your coastline. But that's it for now. Lots going on in the tropics. I'll, of course, have future videos ahead of all these systems. But thank you all for watching. That's it for now.